Welcome to Goodnight Audio, your cozy little corner for bedtime stories. Take a deep breath, let the world fade away, and let our voice carry you into a peaceful night. May you enjoy every story we tell.
The Gathering Storm. Kaelan stood at the edge of the training ground, the early morning mist swirling around him like whispers of forgotten memories. The atmosphere was electric, charged with the tension of impending conflict. He could feel it in the pit of his stomach, an anxious anticipation that thrummed through the air, echoing the distant roars of thunder from a storm brewing beyond the horizon.
"Come on, don't just stand there looking pretty,"
Lyra called out, her voice teasing but underlined with urgency.
Look at
She
you,
was balancing
all
on one
serious.
foot, her arms
Come on,
outstretched
let's see
like
if
a
you can keep
tightrope
up
walker,
today.
her dark hair dancing in the wind. If we're going to take down Queen Seraphine, we need to practice more than just looking heroic. Kaelan shook his head, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth, despite the heavy weight of their mission. Right? Because that's the secret to defeating a queen. Fashion and flair, he replied, stepping forward to join her. Eldrin watched from a distance, his wise eyes narrowing as he inspected the improvised weapons the group had created. They were a mishmash of materials, old swords repurposed, wood shaped into spear tips, and a variety of magical runes scrawled across them in haste. "Focus, you too. The enemy will not wait for your theatrics," he reminded, though his voice held a trace of affection. Varyn stood a bit apart, his muscular frame illuminated by the soft light of dawn. He was sharpening his greatsword, the sound of metal against stone creating a rhythm that set him apart from the jovial energy of the others. Every so often, his gaze drifted toward Kaelan, a glimmer of something unreadable in his eyes. "While you two are busy making jokes, I suggest you take a look at our actual weapons," Varyn interjected, his tone carrying the weight of a challenge. "These won't defend us if we don't treat them with respect." He threw a glance toward Eldrin, as if challenging him to disagree. Kaelan felt the tension rise, a subtle push and pull between the fierce warrior and the mischievous thief. "We know how to fight, Varyn," he said, trying to diffuse the situation, yet unable to hide the slight edge in his voice. "But we also need to stay sharp mentally, not just physically." "Spoken like a true chosen one," Varyn replied, sarcasm dripping from his words.
We are not alone.
"Let's just hope your magic can save you when it really matters." Lyra stepped between them, her eyes bright with mischief. "Enough with the testosterone! How about a friendly wager? Whoever loses the next spar has to clean the training ground for a week. How does that sound?" She flashed a grin, her playful nature a balm to the brewing storm of animosity.
The next person
Kaelan
to raise their
chuckled,
voice
appreciating her
answers to me.
lightheartedness. "Deal. But I'm not losing to you, Lyra. Don't underestimate me," she declared, feigning offense. "I've been practicing." Eldrin raised an eyebrow, his interest piqued. "Very well, but remember, this is not merely a game. With Queen Seraphine's forces gathering, every moment we spend here is crucial." The playful banter paused as the weight of their mission sank in. Kaelan felt a chill run down his spine, a stark reminder that their light-hearted moments were often fleeting. "All right," he said, gathering himself. "Let's put these new tactics to the test." They positioned themselves on opposite ends of the makeshift training ground. Kaelan faced Lyra, his dual swords gleaming in the early morning light. He could see the determination in her piercing green eyes, and for a moment, he admired her strength, her willingness to fight for freedom. With a swift movement, she lunged forward, attempting to close the distance. Kaelan sidestepped, a fluid motion that felt instinctual. Their blades met with a clash, the sound reverberating through the quiet morning like a herald of the chaos to come. "Remember to focus on your footwork?" Eldrin shouted, his voice breaking the rhythm of the spar. "Balance is key. Do not let emotion cloud your judgment." As they sparred, Kaelan felt the exhilaration build within him. Each clash of their weapons sent sparks of adrenaline through his veins. But in the back of his mind, the tension of what lay ahead loomed like a dark cloud. Lyra danced around him, her agility impressive as she flipped backward to evade his strike. "You'll have to do better than that, pretty boy," she teased. laughter bubbling up despite the grim atmosphere surrounding them. Kaelan couldn't help but grin, the infectious joy in her spirit breaking through the layers of dread coiling in his heart. But as he launched another attack, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were all hiding behind humor, using it as a shield against the reality that awaited them. Varyn stepped forward, his expression turning serious.
Let's see how well you can take a hit.
He swung his sword toward Kaelan, who barely managed to parry it in time. The impact sent vibrations through his arms, and Kaelan staggered back, realizing that they were all going to have to push themselves further than ever before.
Let's make this interesting,
Lyra called, diving into the fray alongside Varyn, combining their strengths against Kaelan. You're outnumbered now. Kaelan felt a spark of defiance ignite within him. I can handle it, he shouted, focusing his elemental magic, calling forth a gust of wind that swept toward his opponents. The shift in the atmosphere was palpable, a chaotic swirl of energy that sent Lyra and Varyn stumbling back. Impressive, Eldrin exclaimed, but there was a hint of concern in his voice. But conserve your energy, Kaelan. You'll need it when the real battle begins. Just as they regrouped, a sharp crack of thunder echoed overhead, snapping their attention toward the darkening sky. A storm was indeed brewing, but it wasn't just the weather that made Kaelan's heart race. The tension between the group, the playful facade, the weight of the looming battle, all of it was pushing them toward a breaking point. What's wrong? Lyra asked, her playful demeanor fading as she caught his worried expression. You're getting lost in your head again. Kaelan shook his head, trying to shake off the shadows of doubt. What if we're not ready for what's coming? Varyn crossed his arms, his scowl deepening. We don't have the luxury of time for doubts. If we don't prepare ourselves, Seraphine will strike first, and none of our skills will matter. The reality of his words struck Kaelan like a physical blow. They were teetering on the edge of a precipice, and one wrong step could send them tumbling into chaos. Let's refocus, Eldrin said, raising his staff as a beacon of authority. We need to work together, trust one another completely. Only then will we stand a chance. With a shared nod, they turned their attention back to their training, but the tension lingered, thick and palpable. Every joke felt heavy with unspoken fears, and as the wind picked up, Kaelan couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing at the eye of the storm, just before the chaos would inevitably unfold. And as he glanced at his companions, he understood that this confrontation wouldn't just test their skills. It would expose the fractures within their group, the wounds that had yet to heal. Let's give it everything we've got, Kaelan declared, his voice steadying as determination took root within him. The battle for Eldoria was approaching, and they would need to confront not just their enemies, but their own shadows as well. The laughter and teasing faded, replaced by the sound of swords clashing and the thunderous call of a storm on the horizon. The gathering storm wasn't just outside, it was within them, waiting to break free. As the storm clouds rolled ominously overhead, Kaelan took a deep breath, his pulse quickening. We're not just training for practice, he stated, turning to face his companions. We're training for our lives. The words hung heavy in the air, amplifying the unease that had begun to settle among them. Yeah, and not just ours, Lyra chimed in, her eyes sparkling with mischief that barely masked her worry. We might as well be putting on a show for Seraphine. If we're going to die, let's at least do it in style. She twirled a dagger, the blade glinting with a touch of magic as she flipped it effortlessly in the air. And Varyn scoffed, his muscles tensed as he held a greatsword aloft. Let's focus on not dying first. Styles don't matter if you're a corpse. His tone was gruff, but the slightest hint of a smirk flickered across his lips. The momentary lightness was quickly overshadowed by the tension of their reality. Enough jokes, Eldrin interjected, his voice calm but firm, like the eye of the storm. We have to fuse our strengths if we are to stand a chance against Seraphine. Kaelan, your control over water can help temper Varyn's brute force, while Lyra's agility and stealth will be essential for reconnaissance. Kaelan nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle upon his shoulders. Right. So, we need to find a way to blend our abilities in a way that can catch her off guard. We can't afford to be predictable. As they strategized, the first drops of rain began to fall, pattering against the leaves overhead. The sound was almost soothing, until a resounding crash of thunder rolled through the sky, echoing like a distant battle cry. Lyra looked up, her expression turning serious. "That can't be good," she murmured. "Storm brewing means we'll be fighting against the elements too. It's not just her forces we need to worry about. Every detail counts," Varyn grumbled, sharpening the edge of his sword with a focused intensity. "The last thing we need is for nature to turn against us." He glanced toward Kaelan, searching for confirmation. "Can you summon the winds to help us?" "I can," Kaelan replied, his mind racing. "But I'll need to be careful. Too much energy expended in one go, and I risk losing control." He didn't voice his concern about being overwhelmed. The fear of failure still loomed over him like the dark clouds above. With that, they shifted gears, the playful banter dissipating into an atmosphere charged with determination. Eldrin began outlining potential scenarios and how each of their abilities could complement the others in a fight. "Let's run through a few formations. Practice makes perfect." The group fell into a rhythm, each of them taking turns at different roles. Lyra dashed around the training ground, slipping between the trees, while Varyn swung his sword with practiced ferocity. Eldrin used his staff to summon spectral creatures that tested their reflexes and reactions. "Keep your guard up," Varyn bellowed as he barely managed to parry a blow from a shimmering wolf summoned by Eldrin. The sound of their weapons clashing against one another mingled with the increasing thunder outside, the world beyond their training grounds melding into chaos. With each swing, Kaelan felt the storm inside him echoing the tempest above. As he conjured currents of water, he imagined them freezing against Varyn's blade, solidifying to provide a shield against any attacks. Lyra leaped gracefully, darting in and out, finding the weaknesses in the formation and correcting them in real time.
And you're finished.
But as they continued, the cracks began to show.
No!
The tension that had been
said
festering
no!
under the surface
I am
surged
not
forth,
afraid of
like
you!
the wind ripping
Do
through
your
the trees.
worst!
Deuven,
Silence.
Varyn
I will not
shouted
have
at
this
Lyra,
dispute
frustration
jeopardize the
boiling over
mission.
after a miscommunication led to an
impossible.
awkward
I
fumble
cannot
during a
work with him
training
another
maneuver.
step.
This
You can't
isn't a
start this
game,
war.
Lyra shot back, her green eyes blazing.
It's not too late to stand
I care,
down.
but if you keep acting like a stubborn ox, you're
So
going to be
many
the
lives
first to go
lost
down
in
when we
storm.
face Seraphine.
It breaks my heart.
Enough,
But we must keep
Eldrin
moving
commanded,
forward if we
raising
hope
his
to
voice
survive
to cut
this.
through the noise. We're on the same side here. We need to put aside our grievances for the greater good. His voice held a weight of authority that stilled the air around them. Kaelan could feel the tension in the air. Old wounds threatened to surface. Trust and camaraderie were tested at every turn. "We can't let our fears divide us," he said, stepping between them. "We've all faced loss, but this is our chance to turn that pain into strength." Their gazes shifted toward him, the moment hanging like the drops of rain beginning to fall harder. Lyra broke the silence first, her voice quieter now. "He's right. We can't afford to let personal grudges get in the way of our mission. We have to trust one another." Varyn took a deep breath, his posture softening as he exhaled the tension. "Fine, let's work through it. I just don't want to be the one left behind." Kaelan nodded, grateful for the fragile truce. "Then let's make that our goal. We'll ensure no one is left behind, even when the storm rages." But as they prepared to continue training, a piercing scream echoed from the direction of their camp. It was followed by the sound of chaos, the crack of splintering wood and frantic shouting. "What was that?" Lyra exclaimed, her eyes wide with alarm. Without waiting for an answer, Kaelan sprinted toward the noise, his heart pounding in his chest. The storm that had been brewing above was nothing compared to the storm that was now brewing within him. They were no longer just training for their confrontation with Queen Seraphine. They were facing a battle of a different kind. A battle for survival. As he and his companions dashed toward the source of the commotion, a chilling realization settled in their preparations were about to be put to the ultimate test. The stakes had never been higher, and with every footfall, the storm gathered around them. One they would either confront together or succumb to, alone. Kaelan's heart raced as he burst into the clearing where their camp had been set up. The chaos was immediate and overwhelming. Tents flapped wildly in the gusty winds, sending bits of fabric fluttering like frightened birds. But it wasn't just the wind that had caused this turmoil. Several members of their party were scrambling to fend off a trio of monstrous creatures that had somehow slipped through their defenses. What are those things? Lyra yelled as she sidestepped a lunging beast, its claws swiping the air where she had just been standing.
It's too
The creatures
dangerous.
resembled massive
You have
wolves,
to turn back now.
but their eyes glowed with an unnatural hue, and their fur was matted with dark, glistening sludge that dripped onto the ground. They're shadow hounds, Eldrin shouted. His voice strained as he conjured a barrier of shimmering light between himself and one of the beasts. They must have been drawn here by the turmoil of our training.
Great, just what we need.
Varyn cursed, hefting his greatsword and preparing to engage one of the shadow hounds, which had turned its attention to him, bearing rows of jagged teeth. Kaelan felt the weight of responsibility pressing on his shoulders as he moved instinctively to assist.
Focus. We have to drive them away before they hurt anyone.
He grabbed one of his swords, feeling the familiar grip settle into his hand, and sprinted toward the nearest shadow hound, dodging its snapping jaws as it lunged for him. With a swift motion, he swung his blade, channeling a surge of elemental magic that sent a wave of water crashing against the creature. The shadow hound yelped in surprise, skidding to a halt as the water splashed around it. But it was not deterred. Instead, it shook off the liquid like a dog emerging from a pond and charged again. Kaelan, behind you! Lyra's urgent voice rang out, and he pivoted just in time to see another shadowhound barreling towards him. In a split-second decision, he shifted his weight and launched himself to the side, narrowly avoiding the creature's attack. Varyn's blade connected with the first shadowhound, cleaving through its side and causing it to yelp. But even as he struck, the creature seemed to absorb some of the damage, its form shimmering ominously as it lunged for him again. "We can't keep this up," Eldrin yelled, desperation creeping into his voice as he struggled to maintain his barrier. "We need a plan." Kaelan took a moment to catch his breath, his mind racing. "Lyra, can you use your illusions? Distract them long enough for us to regroup?" "I'm on it." Lyra nodded, her face a mask of determination. She began to weave her hands through the air, conjuring images of multiple copies of herself. Suddenly, several Lyras appeared, scattering around the camp and confusing the shadow hounds. The beasts hesitated, torn between which target to pursue, giving Kaelan the opening he needed. He locked eyes with Varyn. "Let's flank them."
You shall
"Right."
not
Varyn grunted, his fierce grin returning as he pivoted, readying himself for another assault. Kaelan dashed alongside Varyn, both men moving as one. They surged toward the closest shadowhound, cutting off its escape route. Kaelan raised his sword, summoning the element of water once more, this time adding a gust of wind to create a blinding spray that caught the creature off guard. "Now," he shouted, and they both struck in unison. Varyn's blade pierced the shadowhound's flank, while Kaelan's sword severed the creature's neck. It let out a haunting howl that echoed in the clearing before it collapsed, dissipating into a pool of darkness that melted away into the ground. "We can do this!" Kaelan shouted, feeling a rush of adrenaline and relief. But just as he began to think they were gaining the upper hand, the remaining shadow hounds intensified their attacks. The sound of snarling filled the air, a grim reminder that their fight was far from over. Lyra, now visible again amidst the chaos, called out, "Kaelan, there's too many of them." Her voice was steady, but Kaelan could hear the strain beneath it. "We can't give up." He felt a fierce determination surge through him.
They're drawn to our fear. Let's show them we're stronger.
Eldrin, still battling one of the shadow hounds, cast a glance at Kaelan.
Use your elemental abilities to bind them. I can create an opening.
With a nod of understanding, Kaelan focused, tapping into the depths of his power. Water swirled around him, rising from the ground and coalescing into an arc that stretched toward the remaining beasts. He felt the air crackle with energy, drawing on the strength of the storm above. Now, Eldrin shouted, lifting his staff high. A blinding bolt of lightning shot from his staff, illuminating the clearing as it struck the ground. The light splayed out, disrupting the Shadowhound's momentum and throwing them off balance. Kaelan seized the moment. This is it. He channeled his magic fully, sending tendrils of water snaking towards the Shadowhounds, binding their legs and slowing their attacks. As they struggled, he propelled the water forward, encasing them in shimmering prison like barriers. Varyn moved in, a feral roar erupting from him as he dispatched another beast with a deft strike. "One down! We can finish this!" he bellowed, momentum and excitement evident in his voice. Kaelan grinned, adrenaline propelling him forward. Together. But even as they pressed their advantage, the shadows thickened around them.
I've analyzed the data
The
logs
remnants
from
of the Shadowhounds began to pulse
Based on efficiency
ominously,
metrics,
gathering
I'm
into a
assigning
swirling
these
mass
teams for
that
the
formed
next
an
phase
even
of
larger
training.
creature. It loomed before them, eyes blazing with fury and intent. Is this a joke? Lyra panted, her previous bravado wavering as they all faced the newly formed threat. How do we fight back? Kaelan felt a chill run down his spine as he stared into the creature's depths, a fearsome reflection of their earlier struggles now coalescing into something far more dangerous. We have to fight, no matter what it takes. This is our home, and we will protect it. As the storm rumbled above,
Look at you,
signaling the
absolutely
chaotic turn of
hopeless.
events, Kaelan and his friends prepared themselves once again.
Maybe next
With
time.
trust and resolve binding them together, they faced the monster, knowing that this confrontation would not only test their skills, but also the strength of their camaraderie and the bonds they had forged through shared pain. As they readied themselves for the clash, Kaelan's heart raced not just from fear, but also from the unmistakable truth. They were on the brink of something greater than they had ever imagined. A gathering storm that would change everything. As dawn broke over the ragged hills surrounding their makeshift camp, a sense of urgency hung in the air, like the heavy mist that clung to the earth. Kaelan Stormrider stood at the edge of their training ground, eyes scanning the horizon where the first light met the darkened skies. The shadow of Queen Seraphine loomed over them, and with every passing moment, it felt like the weight of impending conflict pressed down on their shoulders. "We need to be ready," Kaelan called out, rallying his companions. "If Seraphine's forces come at us, we won't have a moment to lose." He turned to the group, determination set in his deep blue eyes that mirrored the stormy seas. Lyra Shadowbane was perched on a nearby rock, sharpening her daggers with a careful precision that spoke to both her anxiety and her resolve. "Let's hope they come at us one by one, then. I prefer my chances against a handful of goons instead of an army." Her sharp tongue was ever present, yet Kaelan could see the worry in her green eyes. They had all experienced too much darkness recently, and this felt like another prelude to chaos. Varyn Bloodbane flexed his fingers, a feral grin spreading across his face.
The darkness is rising.
"I'd rather face an army."
So are we.
Nothing like a good fight
We
to get the
face
blood
this
pumping.
together.
His
Until the very
enthusiasm was
end.
infectious, but beneath it lay an undercurrent of something darker. Kaelan couldn't shake the feeling that Varyn's appetite for battle was less about camaraderie and more about personal glory. Eldrin the Wise stepped forward, the air around him shimmering with latent energy. Power is drawn to conflict, and the shadows grow stronger with each passing day. We must combine our strengths, forge weapons both physical and strategic. His voice resonated with an ancient authority that seemed to calm their chaotic thoughts, but the tension between them was palpable. "Right," Kaelan said, pacing back and forth as he contemplated their options. "We should split into teams. I'll train with Lyra on combat strategies, while Eldrin and Varyn can focus on crafting magical enhancements for our weapons." Lyra rolled her eyes, her sarcasm slipping back into play.
We don't have much time.
"Wonderful! I get to learn from Mr. Stormy over here. Just keep your daggers ready." Kaelan shot back, unable to suppress a grin. It was moments like this, with their banter, that reminded him of their strength as a unit. "Eldrin, how can we enhance our existing weapons?" I can conjure water blades, but if we can make them even sharper... Eldrin interjected, a twinkle in his eye. Water combined with the energy of lightning can create a blade that cuts through shadows as easily as it cuts through flesh. He raised his staff, and sparks danced around them, crackling with potential. The mood shifted as Kaelan caught a flicker of excitement in the other's expressions. Varyn began to gather scraps of metal and stone, enthusiasm sparking within him. Let's get to work. I know how to wield a blade, but how to enhance it with your magic? That's something I can get behind. The group dispersed, excitement blending with the undertone of anxiety. Kaelan felt the thrill of anticipation coursing through him as he and Lyra set up for their training session. She expertly dodged his water blades, laughter bubbling up despite the gravity of their situation. Is this really the best you've got? She teased, narrowly escaping a thrust aimed at her midsection. Just you wait. Kaelan countered, gritting his teeth in focus. Each encounter revealed their strengths, and he could feel their bond tighten. The laughter echoed against the trees, momentarily pushing back the shadows. As the sun climbed higher, casting warm hues over the ground, Kaelan couldn't shake the awareness of what lay ahead. They were preparing not just for a battle, but for their very lives. With each swing, each flick of his wrist, the laughter dwindled into silence, replaced by a shared understanding of the weight they carried. Meanwhile, Eldrin and Varyn worked fervently, combining metals and magical elements, a spark of power flickering between them. The air vibrated with energy, and Kaelan felt the shift in the atmosphere. "How's it coming along?" he asked, wiping sweat from his brow as he approached them. Eldrin looked up, eyes gleaming with ancient wisdom. "The blades will be infused with elemental magic. Each strike will have the potential to shatter not just flesh, but the very essence of darkness." "Sounds promising," Kaelan replied, trying to infuse enthusiasm back into the air.
"Please, there has to be
But
another
the moment
way.
was short-lived.
Don't do this.
A distant rumble echoed, sending a chill through the
The
group.
time for talk is
The
over.
laughter faded, and a tension settled back in. What was that? Lyra's voice trembled, concern painting her features. "I don't know," Kaelan admitted,
This is
turning
my
toward
camp.
the horizon.
These are my rules.
But it doesn't sound like
you
a good
follow
sign.
them, or you
As
leave
if in
now.
response,
I won't ask again.
the ground shook beneath them, and
The wind is
shadows
rising.
elongated, twisting
They
like
won't
fingers
expect
ready
us
to
in this
grasp
weather.
at their hearts.
We move
The
now.
storm clouds that had been lingering overhead now boiled, dark and threatening. Varyn gripped his sword tightly, the gleam of steel reflecting the darkening skies. "Whatever's coming, we need to be ready for it." Kaelan nodded, feeling a fierce determination surge through him once again. They were not just preparing for any battle, they were gathering their strength to confront an encroaching darkness. A chilling realization washed over him. "This isn't just about us anymore," he murmured, more to himself than to anyone else. "It's about our entire world." "Kaelan," Lyra's sharp tone pulled him back. "Focus. We need to work. We don't have much time." With the storm brewing above them, they returned to their training, determination fueling their movements. But in the back of Kaelan's mind, the whisper of doubt gnawed at him. The gathering storm was more than just weather. It was a harbinger of what was to come. As the final rays of sunlight flickered out, darkness gathered, preparing to descend. Whatever came next would test the very core of their spirits, and they could feel the weight of the choice ahead, to stand united against the storm or let it swallow them whole. As the shadows lengthened with
Your
the approaching
shield
twilight,
cannot stop what is
the
coming,
air around
warrior.
the group grew thick with an
Feel
uneasy
the might
anticipation.
of the mountains'
Kaelan
fury.
stood at the edge of their makeshift training ground, surveying the flickering figures of his companions. They were focused yet tense, their laughter now hushed under the looming threat of Queen Seraphine's wrath. "Let's take a break," Lyra called out, breaking the silence. Her voice was cheerful, but even she couldn't mask the nervousness in her eyes. "We've earned it, haven't we?" The others exchanged glances. Hesitant but eventually nodding, they sank to the ground, hands resting on their knees as they caught their breath. Kaelan wiped the sweat from his brow and forced a smile. "Yeah, I could use a drink." "I'll go grab some water," Eldrin offered, standing up slowly. "Nothing. The old mage had been meticulously teaching them about elemental affinities during their training, and even his usually vibrant spirit seemed dulled by the heavy atmosphere. Varyn grunted in response. "Just make sure it's not that swamp water from last time," he muttered, eyeing the trees as if they were potential ambushers. His sarcasm attempted to lighten the mood, but it fell flat. "I promise, no swamp water." Eldrin chuckled lightly, though the sound felt strained. He moved away, disappearing behind the grove of trees where they had stored their supplies. The remaining trio sat in a companionable silence for a moment, each lost in their thoughts. Kaelan leaned back, gazing up at the sky where dark clouds churned, warning of an impending storm. It was not just the weather he felt. It was as if the very world was echoing their turmoil. "What do you think is coming?" Lyra asked, breaking the quiet. Her voice was steady, but Kaelan could hear the faint tremor beneath it. "Chaos," Varyn replied bluntly, crossing his arms over his armored chest. "And a fight. They'll come for us. They always do." His confidence was a thin veneer, hiding the fear that had begun to fester. Kaelan shot him a look, trying to inject optimism into the atmosphere. "We're ready for them. We've trained hard, and Eldrin's weapons will give us an edge." "Edge or not," Lyra said softly, her green eyes piercing through the gloom. "We still have to face Seraphine and her entire army." She shifted her weight uneasily, her fingers fidgeting with a small dagger she always carried. The sound of rustling leaves drew their attention, and Eldrin returned, a water skin in hand. "I found fresh water, as promised." He chuckled again, a genuine sound this time, and the tension momentarily lifted. As they passed the water skin around, Kaelan caught Lyra's eye. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together. We've fought through too much to turn back now." His resolve firmed, knowing their friendship was their greatest weapon. "Right," Varyn said, though doubt lingered in his tone. "But what if one of us falters? Then we pick each other up," Kaelan stated, feeling the weight of his words. "That's what we do." Lyra raised her chin defiantly. "Exactly. I won't let fear win. We're the only hope Eldoria has against Seraphine." As the conversation picked up, a bright flash lit up the sky, slicing through the encroaching darkness. They all froze, eyes drawn toward the source of the light. A crack of thunder rolled across the sky, reverberating through the ground beneath them, echoing their inner turmoil. "Is that?" Kaelan started, but the question hung unspoken as a wave of electricity seemed to pulse through the air. A shudder of realization swept through the group. Something monumental was on the horizon. "I don't like this," Varyn growled, gripping his sword as he scanned their surroundings. The thunder rumbled again, louder this time, and then another flash illuminated a figure standing at the edge of the trees, tall, cloaked, and menacing. "Who goes there?" Kaelan shouted. I'm rising to his feet, adrenaline flooding his veins.
But you have to listen.
From the shadows stepped a silhouette,
Running
the familiar
away won't
glint of
solve
armor
anything.
catching the dim light.
We need
It was
each
Thorn,
other.
his features obscured, but the tension in the air was unmistakable. "I thought I might find you here," Thorn said, his voice low and dangerous, sending a chill racing down Kaelan's spine. "What do you want?" Kaelan demanded, heart pounding. His mind raced with the implications of Thorn's unexpected presence. "Truce," Thorn said, stepping closer, revealing a flicker of emotion in his eyes that Kaelan couldn't decipher. Was it regret? "You betrayed us once," Kaelan spat, fists clenched, every instinct warning him to be on guard. "Times have changed," Thorn replied sharply, his demeanor shifting. "I have information about Seraphine, something you need to know. She's planning an attack, and it will be worse than you think." Kaelan hesitated, feeling the tension stretch like a taut bowstring. "And why should we trust you?" Thorn's lips twisted into a smirk, but it was tainted with something darker. "Because this time, I'm the one who has everything to lose. I know where her forces are gathering. I know how to stop her." "What's the catch?" Varyn interjected, still on edge, sword raised defensively. "No catch,"
The staff
Thorn
reveals
said,
the
his
path.
voice a low
It leads
growl.
directly
"Just
through
an
the
alliance.
mines.
The risks
For now.
are high, but it is the
Kaelan felt
only
the world
way.
narrow down
Then
to
we
just him
prepare
and
at
Thorn,
once.
the weight of their shared history pressing down on him. Old wounds throbbed. But this was a chance they couldn't ignore. We don't have time for games.
This is the
The
target
thorn
zone.
stepped forward,
We hit them
the air
hard
crackling
and
between
fast,
them,
and
for
we
a
don't
brief
stop
moment,
until the
Kaelan
objective
saw
is
something in
secured.
his former ally's eyes that spoke of pain, betrayal, and perhaps a glimmer of hope. Trust me, Kaelan. I don't want to see her win either. Lyra stepped up, her expression wary but intrigued. What's the plan then? Thorn smirked, the kind that promised trouble. First, you need to get your hands on some powerful artifacts, and I can show you where. Kaelan looked back at Lyra and Varyn, both wearing expressions of mixed disbelief and cautious optimism. Do we risk it? Lyra asked softly, almost a whisper. Kaelan weighed the possibilities. Feeling the weight of their choices pressing down upon him, they were standing at the precipice of something that could either save their world or plunge it further into darkness.
Watch
do
the
it.
skies.
He decided, heart racing as he faced Thorn. But know this, if you betray us again, I will not hesitate to end it. Thorn nodded,
The
a
storm
flicker of understanding
intensifies.
passing
Stay
between them.
close.
Let's gather what we
We've
need.
lost the path here.
The storm is coming, and we'll face it together.
Watch the ridge.
Kaelan declared,
By
feeling
the
the surge of
stars.
determination
Look
fill
at
the space
that.
between them.
I've never
The
seen
group's
anything
resolve
like
ignited
it.
again,
We need
tempered
to
by
be
a new
ready.
alliance,
Prepare yourselves.
but they couldn't shake the feeling that this was merely the eye of the storm. A fleeting moment of calm before chaos erupted once more. As they prepared to follow Thorn into the unknown, the thunder echoed ominously overhead, a reminder that darkness was not just coming, it was already here. The Battle of Elements. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm, golden hue over the battlefield as Kaelan and his allies gathered at the edge of the ancient ruins. The air crackled with tension, a precursor to the impending chaos. Kaelan's heart raced, each beat echoing the dread swirling within him. They had come too far to turn back now, and he could feel the weight of their shared destinies pressing down on them like an unyielding storm. Is everyone ready? He called out, his voice steady despite the anxiety gnawing at him. Lyra, seated on a fallen stone, was fiddling with her daggers, the light glinting off the steel as she sharpened them with meticulous care. Her usual bravado seemed muted, but there was a glint of fierce determination in her green eyes. Ready as I'll ever be, she replied, a smirk curling her lips. Just don't slow me down, pretty boy. Varyn stood nearby, his imposing figure clad in heavy armor, fingers drumming impatiently against the hilt of his greatsword. Enough chatter, he barked, though his tone held an undercurrent of camaraderie. We'll need more than banter to take down Seraphine. Eldrin the Wise moved between them, his expression calm but serious. Focus your energy, my friends. The elements are restless today, as if they sense the battle to come. Remember, it's not just about brute strength. We must harness the very forces of nature to succeed. Kaelan took a deep breath, his mind racing back to their training sessions, where laughter often punctuated their drills. But this was different. The stakes had never been higher. We need a plan, he said, glancing at Lyra and Varyn. We divide into two groups. Eldrin and I will draw her attention while you two flank from the sides. Flank. Varyn's brow furrowed. You think we're just going to play decoys while you get all the glory. It's about strategy, not glory. Kaelan shot back, frustration bubbling. Seraphine is powerful, and if we don't work together, we'll all fall. Lyra nodded, her eyes sparkling with mischief. I like this plan. Besides, if we manage to sneak up on her, I might get to snag something shiny from her hoard. Kaelan chuckled, the momentary levity easing the tension. Just don't get too distracted by her jewels. Focus on the task. Eldrin raised his staff, channeling energy as the winds began to swirl around them. Let the elements guide you. Trust in your instincts, and remember, you are stronger together. With a final nod to each other, they took their positions. The ground beneath them trembled as Seraphine's forces, a horde of shadowy figures, advanced. Kaelan's grip tightened on his twin swords, feeling the cool metal thrumming with energy, responding to his determination. As the battle commenced, elemental magic erupted all around them. Kaelan and Eldrin launched a barrage of water and lightning, creating a dazzling spectacle that lit up the darkening sky.
Now Lyra!
Kaelan shouted, motioning for her to strike. She darted forward, agile and stealthy, weaving through the enemy lines with a grace that belied the chaos surrounding her. Daggers glinted as she struck, finding gaps in armor and causing confusion among the ranks. Kaelan felt a swell of pride for his friends, their growth evident in their movements. Varyn, in the thick of battle, swung his sword with ferocity, each strike punctuated by the shouts of their foes. "Keep pushing," he bellowed, his laughter ringing out as he threw a particularly large opponent off balance. "This is what I live for." But as the tide of battle ebbed and flowed, a chilling laughter echoed through the chaos. "Is this truly the best you can muster?" Queen Seraphine's voice cut through the clamor, smooth and taunting. She stood at the center of the battlefield, an ethereal figure wreathed in shadow, her eyes glowing with malevolence. Kaelan felt a surge of anger at her audacity. "We're just getting started," he shouted back, adrenaline coursing through his veins. The elements swirled around him, and he could feel their power growing, awaiting his command. "Bring forth the storm," Eldrin cried, raising his staff high. Lightning crackled and arched from the sky, merging with the wind and water Kaelan summoned. Together they formed a massive wave that surged toward Seraphine, who merely raised her hand, a shield of dark energy flickering to life before her. The clash sent shockwaves through the battlefield, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Seraphine's laughter faltered for a moment, her surprise evident, but she quickly regained her composure, her face twisting into a snarl. "You think you can defeat me? I am the embodiment of this realm's darkness." "Not if we stand together!" Kaelan yelled, his voice rising above the din. He could feel Lyra and Varyn rallying beside him, their combined strength bolstering his resolve. The tension in the air thickened, the elements responding to their unity. Lyra leaped forward, using the distraction to slip past the enemy ranks, her daggers glinting in the fading light. "Just wait until I get my hands on that crown," she shouted, her voice laced with mischief. In the midst of the chaos, a burst of water erupted from the ground, drenching their enemies and creating a slippery terrain. "Now's your chance," Varyn shouted, charging forward with a battle cry that resonated like thunder. The sight of his unwavering courage ignited a fire within Kaelan. They pressed onward, drawing closer to Seraphine. The air crackled with tension, the very elements clamoring for release. Kaelan's heart raced as he felt the storm within him peak, ready to unleash its fury upon the Dark Queen. But just as victory seemed within reach, a shadow fell over them, darkening the battlefield. Seraphine raised her arms, her voice rising above the tumult. "You dare challenge me? I will show you the true power of darkness." The ground shook violently, and tendrils of shadow coiled around the heroes, threatening to pull them under. Kaelan's resolve wavered for a heartbeat, but he quickly steadied himself. "We can't give in," he shouted, rallying his friends. Together, they focused, channeling their energies as one. Kaelan's twin swords shimmered with elemental magic, and he pushed against the encroaching darkness with all his might. The struggle felt like a dance, each movement deliberate and precise. With a final, unified cry, they broke through the darkness, a brilliant wave of elemental power crashing against Seraphine's shield. The impact sent a shockwave through the battlefield, and Kaelan's heart surged with hope. But as the dust settled, he realized the battle was far from over. Seraphine stood firm, her expression twisted with fury. "You think you've won? This is merely the beginning." Kaelan and his allies exchanged glances, the gravity of their situation sinking in. The battle raged on. But they had taken a crucial step. There was still much to fight for, and the stakes had never been higher. With renewed determination, they prepared to face whatever darkness awaited them next. Kaelan tightened his grip on the hilts of his swords, feeling the surge of energy coursing through him. The battlefield, once a cacophony of chaos, now resonated with a tense stillness, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Seraphine's formidable presence loomed before them, her dark aura radiating a palpable menace. "You believe you can defeat me?" she taunted, her voice smooth yet filled with malice. Lyra, still catching her breath from her earlier sprint, shot a glance at Kaelan. "What's the plan? We can't just charge him blind," she said, her green eyes glinting with a mix of determination and caution. Varyn's laughter cut through the tension like a blade. "Plan. We make her regret the day she crossed paths with us." He cracked his knuckles, stepping forward, eager for battle. Kaelan nodded, their resolve uniting him with strength. "One need to disrupt her concentration. If we can break her focus, we stand a chance." Without waiting for a reply, he lunged forward, a calculated maneuver. As he advanced, he could feel the winds around him shift, swirling in response to his command. The elemental magic surged within him, a tempest waiting to be unleashed. "Kaelan," Lyra shouted, darting after him, her daggers at the ready. "Cover me." With an agile twist, she slipped past Seraphine's minions, her movements a graceful dance. The enemy seemed caught off guard by her sudden speed, allowing her to slip into the heart of the darkness enveloping Seraphine. Kaelan's heart raced as he noticed a flicker of concern cross the queen's face. "Now!" he shouted, a burst of air forming a vortex around him, propelling him closer to their foe. He aimed for Seraphine, hoping to land a critical blow, but the shadows around her thickened, solidifying into a wall of darkness that repelled his advance. "Fools!" Seraphine screamed, her laughter reverberating across the battlefield. The shadows coiled tighter, and with a flick of her wrist, tendrils of darkness shot toward Kaelan, intent on ensnaring him. But Varyn was quicker, his massive frame intercepting the shadows. "Not today?" he roared, his sword cleaving through the darkness with raw power, illuminating the area with bursts of light. Kaelan seized the opportunity. "Push forward," he yelled, rallying his friends. They fought side by side, each blow they struck resonating with their elemental magic. Kaelan's blade sang as they sliced through the air, water droplets dancing in the aftermath of his strikes. "Nice moves, pretty boy," Lyra called out, a smirk on her lips as she dodged an attack from a shadowy figure. "You might actually impress me yet." He chuckled despite the gravity of the situation. "Just keep your eyes peeled. This isn't over." As they moved in sync, Kaelan felt their bond solidify, a mixture of friendship and fierce loyalty that ignited a flame within him. Every time he glanced at Lyra, her quick wit and determination gave him strength. Varyn's relentless spirit drove him forward, a reminder that they were not alone in this
The floor
fight.
is dissolving.
Seraphine's fury grew palpable.
What is this
"You think your
power?
teamwork can best me?"
I
Her
must
voice
regain
resonated
control.
with dark power as she conjured a swirling storm of shadows. "I will show you despair." The ground trembled beneath them as dark waves crashed against their efforts. Kaelan barely managed to keep his footing, feeling the pull of the shadows threatening to drag him down. "Stay close," he yelled, his voice almost lost in the tumult. "Dodge left," Lyra shouted, lunging past him with her daggers raised. The shadows barely missed her, but Kaelan could see the energy sapping her strength. "We need to weaken her defenses." They fought on, every strike a blend of precision and instinct. As Kaelan maneuvered through the chaos, he saw a moment of vulnerability in Seraphine, her concentration faltering as she channeled her power. He seized the moment, rallying his magic. "Together," he called, feeling the elemental forces of air and water coalesce around him. The world slowed for a heartbeat as he focused his energy. "On my mark." Lyra and Varyn nodded, understanding the weight of the moment. Kaelan felt their power join with his, an overwhelming force that seemed to resonate through the air. Now, with a coordinated effort, they unleashed their combined magic. A torrent of water shot forward, electrified by Kaelan's storm-infused power, crashing against Seraphine's darkness. The impact created a brilliant flash, illuminating the battlefield, and for an instant, all was quiet. But then, as quickly as it had begun, calm shattered. Seraphine's laughter echoed, dark and twisted. "You dare to challenge me? This is but a flicker in the shadow of my mind." Kaelan's heart sank as the shadows reformed, now swirling around Seraphine in a protective barrier. "We won't back down." he declared, fury mixing with fear. They had come too far to falter now. Varyn charged, his battle cry roaring through the chaos. I'll break her apart piece by piece. Kaelan moved to flank him, ready to support with another wave of elemental magic, but as he focused, a sharp pain lanced through his side. He glanced down to see a shadowy tendril wrapped around him, pulling him back, sapping his strength. No, he gasped, fighting against the darkness. Kaelan, Lyra screamed, her eyes wide with alarm. She turned to rush to his side, but Varyn intercepted her, grabbing her arm. Stay focused. We can't lose him. Let go of me, she snapped, pulling against his grip. I can help him?
Focus on Seraphine.
Varyn shouted, and for a moment, the two of them struggled in the chaos, torn between loyalty and the need to protect their friend. Kaelan felt the shadows tighten around him, fear creeping into his chest. Keep going, he urged, gritting his teeth against the darkness. I'll find a way. With a roar, Varyn broke free from the shadows, dashing toward Seraphine, and as he did, Kaelan's mind raced. He needed to break free, needed to join them. The realization hit him like a wave. The elemental magic, use it to break her hold. In a desperate act, he focused, drawing from the storm within him. The shadows recoiled, hesitating, and Kaelan seized the moment. Channeling all his energy, he sent a powerful pulse of magic surging towards Seraphine's barrier, forcing it to ripple and crack. Now, Lyra, he shouted, hoping she could hear him over the chaos. On it, she pivoted, her daggers glowing with energy as she launched herself towards Seraphine, aiming to strike true. Just as her daggers neared their target, Seraphine's gaze sharpened, fury replacing the earlier smugness. You dare? She screamed, raising her arms to unleash her darkness in a last-ditch effort. Kaelan's heart raced. They were so close, but the shadows surged again, threatening to engulf them all. In that split second, as the clash of power peaked, everything hung in the balance. The air crackled with energy, and Kaelan knew they were on the edge of something monumental, but the outcome remained uncertain. The battle of elements had reached its climax, and every heartbeat echoed the fight for their futures, each decision laden with consequence. The battlefield quaked as elemental forces collided, the fate of Eldoria hanging in the balance. Kaelan's breath quickened as he forced himself to focus through the pain. The shadows clawed at him, but he could sense the energy of the storm inside him, a tempest waiting to be unleashed. As he drew strength from it, he felt a connection to his allies, an invisible thread weaving them together. Stay strong, he shouted, the words barely escaping his lips as the tendrils constricted tighter around him. He pushed through the agony, feeling the rush of magic course through his veins like lightning. With every ounce of determination, he visualized the water of the ocean and the winds of the skies, swirling and crashing in a glorious storm. I won't be trapped like this. Varyn had reached Seraphine. His greatsword glinting in the chaos. You will pay for everything you've done, he roared, swinging the blade down with all his might. But Seraphine was quicker, twisting her wrist and summoning a wall of shadows that absorbed his strike. Varyn stumbled back, snarling as he gripped his weapon tightly.
Focus, Varyn!
Don't let her manipulate you, Lyra called, darting forward with agility that was almost a blur. She hurled one of her daggers at Seraphine, but the Dark Queen caught it mid-air with a flick of her fingers, her laughter echoing like a sinister bell. Fools, you think you can defeat me with such pathetic attacks? Seraphine taunted, her voice dripping with contempt. She waved her hand, sending a wave of darkness surging toward Lyra, who barely leaped aside in time. Kaelan, Lyra's voice cut through the chaos as she glanced back, fear etched on her features. We need you.
I'm working on it.
Kaelan gritted his teeth, fighting against the shadows. With a roar that echoed his spirit, he channeled the elemental forces within him. Water began to swirl around him, breaking through the darkness. The shadowy tendrils hissed as they released their grip, and for a fleeting moment, Kaelan felt a surge of hope. Now, Kaelan, Eldrin's voice broke through the storm of battle, a guiding light amid the chaos. Use the wind. It can shatter her barrier. The realization hit Kaelan hard. He could weave the elements together, water and air, crashing against the shadows like waves upon the shore. He concentrated, visualizing the storm-gathering strength. Together, he shouted, willing his allies to channel their powers alongside him. Together, Varyn echoed, the fury of his sword clashing against the dark magic surrounding them. Let's show her what we're made of. Lyra nodded, her daggers igniting with elemental energy as she prepared to strike. On 3, Kaelan cried, the power building inside him.
Stay focused on
Varyn
the
had it,
queen.
his muscles tense, ready for the fight of his life. Tiajari! They shouted in unison, unleashing their powers. Kaelan felt the tide of magic swell, the water coalescing into a swirling vortex around him. He thrust his hands forward, directing the tempest at Seraphine. The winds howled, and water surged like a tidal wave, colliding against her dark barrier. For a brief moment, Seraphine's composure faltered. "No, you cannot," she screamed, but the magic struck, causing her shadowy barrier to splinter, exposing her to the onslaught. "Now, Lyra," Kaelan yelled again, urging her forward. With an agile leap, she flew through the air, her daggers gleaming with elemental magic. "This is for everyone you've hurt," she shouted, thrusting the blades toward Seraphine's heart. The Dark Queen retaliated with a wave of shadows, but Kaelan pushed harder, channeling every ounce of his strength into the elemental magic. The winds intensified, lifting Lyra higher as the water twisted around them, forming a protective shield. "Finish it?" Kaelan roared, feeling the storm break free. Lyra let out a fierce battle cry, her daggers piercing through the shadows, finding their mark. The magic collided in a brilliant explosion of light and dark, illuminating the battlefield. Kaelan shielded his eyes, the force of the blast pushing him back. As the smoke cleared, he squinted to see the aftermath. Seraphine staggered, her eyes wide with shock and fury, the shadows around her dissipating. "You will pay for this," she hissed, her voice now tinged with desperation. Varyn charged forward, ready to strike again, but Kaelan held up a hand, feeling the wariness settle in his bones. "No, we need to regroup. We can't let her recover." Lyra landed beside him. "I'm breathless but fierce. We can't stop now. If she regains her power, we'll never get another chance."
I can feel
Kaelan nodded, heart racing as he glanced at his allies. Each of them bore the marks of battle, bruises, cuts, and fatigue. But their resolve was unyielding. We've come too far to back down. We need to work together. Seraphine laughed, a chilling sound that echoed in the chaos. "You think this is over? You've merely delayed the inevitable?" Kaelan's chest tightened. They were out of time. He could feel the shadows gathering strength again, ready to envelop them. "Must act. Everyone focus on her. We need to combine our strengths." As they prepared for the next assault, Kaelan could feel the elements swirling around them, echoing the storm in his heart. "This is our moment," he declared, confidence growing. "We're the storm that will end her reign." With renewed determination, they faced Seraphine once more, the atmosphere crackling with tension. The battle of elements had reached a fever pitch, and each decision weighed heavily on their fates. Kaelan knew they had to act decisively or risk losing everything they had fought for. The air thickened with power, the storm brewing. And as they launched into their next attack, the fate of Eldoria hung precariously in the balance, teetering on the edge of triumph or disaster. Kaelan's heart raced as the battlefield erupted around him. The lingering echoes of Lyra's battle cry still vibrated in the air, and the intensity of their clash with Queen Seraphine surged with a life of its own. A mixture of wind and water danced at his fingertips, and he could feel the pulse of elemental magic thrumming through him, resonating with the chaos unfolding. "Get ready," he shouted, rallying his friends. The remnants of the explosion had settled, leaving a smoky haze that hung thick in the air. He could barely make out Seraphine, now more feral than regal, her dark attire swirling with shadows that threatened to engulf them once more. Lyra, wiping the sweat from her brow, stood poised beside him, daggers still crackling with magic. "We've got this! Just keep your eyes on her!" Varyn, his brow furrowed in concentration, gripped his greatsword tightly. ready for whatever was to come.
Let's show her what we're made of!
As they gathered themselves, Kaelan's mind raced with strategies. Seraphine was powerful, but she was also vulnerable, especially now that they had pushed her to this point. We need to create a distraction, he strategized, something to draw her attention away from one of us. The Eldrin, ever the calm presence amidst chaos, stepped forward, raising his staff. I can summon a creature to confuse her, but it would take focus. Do it. Kaelan interrupted, urgency threading through his voice.
We'll cover you.
Eldrin nodded, and with a flourish, he began to chant an incantation. The ground beneath them trembled as ancient magic took form, drawing energy from the surrounding elements. Shadows shifted and writhed, and from the depths of darkness, a spectral beast emerged, a creature of wind and mist, howling a challenge that echoed across the battlefield. Seraphine's attention snapped to the phantom as it darted toward her, a whirl of confusion and power. "What is this?" she shouted, fury lacing her words. "Now!" Kaelan yelled, and they surged forward, an unstoppable force. Kaelan summoned the winds to lift him, propelling himself into the fray, the water swirling at his command. He could feel the cool droplets slick against his skin as he glided toward Seraphine, determined to press the advantage. "You will not win this fight," he shouted, channeling the fury of the storm. Lyra followed suit, agile and fierce, diving through the gaps of shadow of the race, her daggers glinting in the fragmented light. She launched herself at Seraphine again, each strike deliberate, fueled by memories of those hurt by the Dark Queen's reign. "This is for my family," she cried out, each word punctuated with precision. Varyn charged alongside, his massive sword swinging with force. "I'll carve out a path," he roared, each blow creating an opening for Kaelan and Lyra to press their assault. Seraphine retaliated, her fury manifesting in a whirlwind of shadows that lashed out, striking at Varyn with a ferocity that sent him stumbling back. "You think mere tricks can defeat me?" she snarled, shadows swirling violently around her like a storm. Kaelan felt the impact of her power, a physical blow that threatened to push him away. But he stood firm, his resolve unmoved.
We've come too far,
he shouted, feeling the elemental forces unite around him, empowering his every move. Together, Lyra echoed, and they regrouped, sharing a fierce look that spoke volumes of their determination. Eldrin's creature darted around Seraphine, distracting her further as they took the opportunity to rally their combined magic. Kaelan raised his hands, drawing on the storm, feeling the air vibrate with potential. "No. Lyra, strike." With a swift motion, Lyra lunged again, her daggers infused with the elemental power Kaelan channeled. The blades glimmered, and she aimed for the heart of darkness, where Seraphine's power seemed to pulse most dangerously. But just as her daggers were about to meet their mark, Seraphine lashed out, shadow solidifying into a wall that absorbed the impact. The collision sent a shockwave that knocked Kaelan off his feet, but he quickly regained his stance. "Is that all you've got?" Seraphine taunted, her eyes burning with defiance. "You think you can defeat me? I will show you true power." Kaelan gritted his teeth, adrenaline surging.
"No, we will end this together."
He glanced at Eldrin, whose eyes gleamed with ancient wisdom. "What do we need to do?" "We must unify our strengths." Eldrin responded, his voice steady. "Focus your magic into one force. It must be a single, decisive strike." Kaelan nodded, heart pounding, as he felt the connection with his allies deepen. "We channel everything into one final attack." "On my mark," Eldrin instructed, his staff glowing brightly. They formed a circle, linking their magic. Kaelan at the forefront, commanding the storm, the wind swirling around him with intensity. Now, all at once, they unleashed their combined power. An explosion of elemental magic colliding with Seraphine. The air crackled as light and shadow battled fiercely, creating a blinding display of energy that lit up the darkening skies above. Kaelan strained against the intensity of their magic, pouring everything he had into the assault, urging the storm to unleash its full fury. As the energy converged, Seraphine screamed, her voice a blend of fury and fear. The shadows around her twisted violently as the combined attack surged toward her, illuminating her darkened form. Then, with a resounding crack, the magic collided with Seraphine. The force pushed her back, causing her to stagger, the shadows faltering, but her eyes remained locked on Kaelan, filled with a mix of wrath and desperation. "You cannot defeat me!" The explosion reverberated through the battlefield, shaking the very ground beneath their feet. Kaelan braced himself, watching the aftermath unfold, breathless and filled with both hope and dread. Seraphine, caught in the vortex of their combined might, began to lose her footing, shadows unraveling around her like threads of a dark tapestry. "No, this cannot be," she cried out, fury giving way to panic. Kaelan stepped forward, feeling the weight of their actions settle in. "You underestimated us," he declared, voice steady, even as the storm roared around him. "This is for everyone you've hurt." And just as the tide turned, a flicker of uncertainty crossed Seraphine's face. A crack in her otherwise fierce demeanor, but the victory was not without cost. As the last remnants of magic dissipated, Kaelan felt his strength waning. He looked at his allies, each of them exhausted yet determined, their eyes reflecting a fierce camaraderie forged in battle. The fight was far from over, but at that moment, they had turned the tide. Together, they had become a storm, and the darkness that had threatened to swallow them was finally showing signs of retreat. But the question loomed. What would be the price of their victory? The air was thick with tension as Kaelan, Lyra, Eldrin, and Varyn stood at the center of the battlefield, each of them battered yet resolute. The chaos around them swirled, punctuated by distant roars and flashes of light as Seraphine's forces clashed against the defenders of Eldoria. Above, dark clouds churned ominously, mirroring the turmoil on the ground. "We need to push forward," Kaelan shouted, his voice barely carrying over the cacophony of battle. He glanced at his comrades, noting the wariness etched on their faces but also the fire in their eyes. "We can't let her regain control?" Lyra's lips curled into a fierce grin, even as she tightened her grip on her daggers. "You just love a good fight, don't you? Let's show her what we're made of." She darted forward, her agility turning the chaos of the battlefield into a dance, dodging incoming strikes with a finesse that spoke of countless narrow escapes. Eldrin followed closely, his staff raised high, channeling bursts of ancient magic that wove through the air like ethereal ribbons, disorienting the shadows that thronged toward them. "Focus your energies, my friends! Together we can counter her magic!" His voice resonated with authority, the kind that rallied even the most battered of souls. As they pushed forward, Varyn fell in step beside Kaelan, his presence a solid reassurance. "Don't let up," he urged, swinging his greatsword with brutal efficiency, cleaving through the minions of shadows that dared to approach. "We've come too far to falter now." Kaelan felt the weight of their combined resolve, a spark igniting within him. For Thalandor, for all of Eldoria, he lunged ahead, his sword slicing through the air as he called forth the elements. Water swirled around him, merging with the tempest of air, creating a shield against the oncoming darkness. But just then, a chilling laughter echoed from the shadows. Seraphine emerged, her figure bathed in darkness, eyes gleaming with malevolence. "You think you can defeat me with such trivial strength?" she taunted, her voice a silken whisper that chilled Kaelan to the bone. "Trivial," Kaelan challenged, refusing to show fear. "You've sown chaos, but we're here to end it." He took a step forward, the storm at his back crackling with energy. With a swift gesture, Seraphine summoned a wave of shadows that surged forward like a living tide. Kaelan's heart raced as he felt the dark energy press against him, threatening to consume him. "Now!" he shouted, and with a surge of will, he unleashed a torrent of water, crashing against the darkness. The two forces collided violently, a chaotic dance of light and shadow that sent ripples through the battlefield. Kaelan gritted his teeth, pouring every ounce of his power into the torrent, determined to hold the line. Lyra, seeing the struggle, sprang into action. "I'll flank her," she called, darting around the periphery, her small stature allowing her to maneuver through the chaos with ease. Her daggers gleamed, reflecting the flashes of light as she struck from the shadows, harrying Seraphine's attention. "Distract her, Lyra," Eldrin commanded, weaving his staff in a pattern that conjured a protective barrier around Kaelan. "Keep her off balance. We need her distracted while Kaelan channels his power." Seraphine, noticing Lyra's approach, sneered and lashed out with a tendril of shadow. "Foolish girl, you think you can hide from me?" But as she turned, Kaelan seized the opportunity, focusing his energy into a singular point, the storm around him building to a crescendo. "Now, Lyra," he yelled. The moment hung in the air, pregnant with possibility. With a final flick of her wrist, Lyra sent a handful of glittering powder into the air, casting an illusion that momentarily cloaked her presence. Seraphine hesitated, and it was just the opening Kaelan needed. He released the full force of his magic, a spiraling vortex of water and wind that exploded forth, aimed directly at Seraphine. The clash of elements resonated through the air like a thunderclap, illuminating the battlefield in blinding light. Kaelan felt the energy surge within him, the power of the storm mingling with his allies' strength. "Together!" he cried, his voice a rallying call that united them. As the elemental magic surged toward Seraphine, she screamed, her form engulfed in the tempest. "You will pay for this?" The shadows twisted and writhed around her, but they began to falter, unraveling against the strength of their combined attack. In that moment, a glimmer of victory flickered in Kaelan's heart, but it was immediately tempered by the cost. He could feel his strength draining, the storm's energy pulling at him like a demanding tide.
I can't hold it.
He gasped, struggling to maintain control. "Don't give in, Kaelan," Varyn shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos.
We're right here. Push through.
With renewed determination, Kaelan focused on his allies, their presence grounding him. He locked eyes with Lyra, who was now sprinting back toward him, ready to lend her strength. "We'd do this together," she affirmed, her expression fierce. As the vortex of magic surged forward, Kaelan channeled the last of his strength into one final push. "For Eldoria!" he roared, and the energy exploded outward, swallowing Seraphine in a maelstrom of elemental fury. In the aftermath, a profound silence fell over the battlefield. The dark clouds began to dissipate, and the shadows retreated, leaving behind the remnants of what had been a fierce confrontation. Kaelan collapsed to his knees, breathless and drained, the storm within him fading. As he looked around, he saw his allies, exhausted but victorious, their faces reflecting a mixture of disbelief and elation. Did we do it?" Kaelan managed to ask, his voice a mere whisper. But even as the question left his lips, the ground trembled beneath them, and a chilling laughter echoed once more. The shadows were not completely vanquished, they had merely retreated. And with them came a sense of foreboding. Seraphine's voice rang out, filled with malice. "This is not over. Stormrider!" A fresh wave of unease washed over them, and Kaelan's heart sank. He realized that their battle had merely entered a new phase, and the true struggle was far from over. As the echoes of the past mingled with the threat of the future, he stood with his allies, ready to face whatever darkness lay ahead.